Hello everyone, welcome back to Too Sweet MTG and welcome to another Commander deck tech. This week I have gone out and built Graaz Unstoppable Juggernaut. For anyone who didn't see the last video in this series, what I've done recently is I have taken apart all my Commander decks and actually sorted them into like staples and stuff. So basically, what I'm planning on doing is every time I go and play Commander, I'll bring down a new deck with me. This is what I built and this is what I have took down last time. Graaz seemed like a ton of fun and it's definitely something I wanted to try out. So let's jump over to Tapped Out and have a look at the deck, and then I'll kind of go over how it went and any upgrades and improvements that I'd make. So there's probably a bit of an elephant in the room. Why is this mono brown deck running 25 swamps? Well, that's because the commander of this deck is actually Sidisi Undead Vizier. This is a secret commander deck, basically. Graaz is really the commander of the deck, but basically I wanted to run some black cards as well. So we'll talk about Sidisi and we'll talk about Graaz, and I'll talk about kind of why I got to this point. So Sidisi is 3 black for a legendary creature zombie Naga. It is a 4/6 with Death Touch. It has Exploit, which is when this creature enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a creature. And when Sidisi Undead Vizier exploits a creature, you may search your library for a card, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. So basically, Sidisi's job is to go and get Graaz out of the deck. It being a black commander means that we can run black cards. That'll become important as we go through the deck tech, but let's quickly go over Graaz. Graaz Unstoppable Juggernaut is 8 mana for a 7/5 legendary artifact creature Juggernaut. It has Juggernauts you control attack each combat if able, Juggernauts you control can't be blocked by walls, and other creatures you control have base power and toughness 5/3 and are Juggernauts in addition to their other creature types. So the plan is we are going to make a load of tokens and play a load of unblockable creatures. With Sidisi, we're going to tutor up Graaz, play Graaz, everything becomes 5/3s, and we swing through and win the game. If you want to go this way, Sidisi doesn't have to be the commander itself. Sidisi having the tutor ability built into the commander straight in the command zone is fantastic. It means that we can go and get Graaz, and also use it for some other utility stuff. There is another commander that does something similar. There's one from Kaldheim that when it attacks it boasts. That you could also use that one. Basically, I had a Sidisi, I didn't have the other one, so that's why we're going with that. So before we go over the individual sections, why did I build it this way? Firstly, I knew I wanted to build Graaz because Graaz seems like a ton of fun. Turning everything into 5/3 seems like a really cool way of winning a game of Magic. The reason why I wanted to do a black version of this is because black is really good at making tokens. You have Bitter Blossom, you have Edric Sar that make thralls. There's a lot of thrall makers. We have Sengir Autocrat. We'll go over this probably in a bit more detail in a moment. But those token makers with Graaz seemed really fun. And the other thing as well is I also wanted to run some Necron cards because I haven't really played with any of the Warhammer cards outside of, well, 1 cube and 2 like the precons themselves. I wanted to give these a go properly. So then we got to run a lot of these cool Necron cards that spit out Necron Warrior tokens as well. Perfect for what this deck is trying to do. So that's a bit of an overview. I'll start going through the sections of the deck in a moment. One thing to note for anyone who's been following the channel and seen a lot of my other deck techs is normally I don't like giving full deck lists. This is because everyone's budgets are different, everyone's playstyles are different, people like different cards, people have access to different cards. If you wanted to build this yourself, take the rough numbers, so take like 12 token makers, take 8 to 10 bits of interaction, have some cheap evasive creatures, some recursion. Take the rough numbers from these, transfer it over into cards that you have or cards that suit your budget and suit your playstyle, basically. Before this video goes up, I'll also put some budget suggestions. I'll add it to this tapped out link, and that'll be down in the description below so you can have a look at it yourself. So let's start going over the different sections of the deck. I think the best place to start is with the token makers. So making tokens is something that black really excels at. You have cheap ones like Bitter Blossom that make 1/1 flyers every turn, which with Graaz out will become 5/3 flyers. That seems really good. You have your bigger options, you have like your Death Tyrants and your Grave Titans that spit out zombie tokens, they're really good. And then we just have kind of like armies and cans. We have like Sengir Autocrat, which makes serfs. Tebish Sat also make thralls. We have Edric Sar, which when you cast another creature spell, you make thralls equal to its mana cost. That's really good. And then we have our cool new Necron cards. You have like Night Scythe, which is a vehicle that makes a Necron. You have Royal Warden, which comes in, makes 2 tap Necrons. It also has Unearth, so you can bring it back from the graveyard. We like that. And then you have their Number is Legion, which is a big X spell, which we can definitely take advantage of. Just wait for the ramp section, which can just put a ton of Necron tokens into play. There are plenty more out there. I found the kind of 12 number for token makers to be about right. You could definitely go up to 16 if that's how you wanted to do it. Like there's cards like Ophiomancer or the big zombie spell that puts 13 zombies into play, stuff like that. That could be really cool in this deck when you're turning them all into 5/3s. To go along with the token makers, I also ran some cheap evasive threats. Basically, these are kind of cheap creatures that we know can get through for some damage, and when they become 5/3s will be really, really good. The only one that's not a artifact is Dothy Voidwalker, mainly because this just mucks up other people's graveyard decks really, really well. And in Commander, you're going to get some advantage from this. This one is not 100% required, if I'm honest with you. It's a nice to have, not a must have. But then cards like Gingerbrute Ornithopter, Signal Pest, and Volt Scourge are all just solid artifact creatures with a bit of evasion that we are going to turn into 5/3s for a ton of damage. It's really fun. So between the token makers and the cheap evasive threats, we're going to have plenty of creatures to buff up and swing through and win the game. But let's talk about actually casting Graaz and casting Sidisi, because Sidisi's 5 mana, that's not too bad. Graaz is a whopping 8, so we do need a decent ramp section to kind of get there. So we'll go through like the obvious stuff first. We have like Arcane Signet, Soul Ring, they're just really, really good. Some of the rest of them I wanted to be on creatures, so that's why we're running things like Ornithopter of Paradise. This is a mana dork that will become a 5/3 with Graaz, so it's becoming a win condition. That's why we're also running something like Leadenmere. Does the same job, it's a mana dork that will become a win condition later on. Obviously we're an artifact deck, so we're going to run Solemn Simulacrum, that kind of thing. And then because we're mono black, one of the best things that mono black can do is run cards like Cryptghast and Magus of the Coffers and Nakana Revenant that basically just like make the black mana that you can make so much more. So Nakana Revenant and Cryptghast double the amount of mana that your swamps tap for, and then Magus of the Coffers is 2 and tap and add a black mana for each swamp that you control. I know Expedition Map isn't technically ramp, it's kind of tutoring for a land, but in a mono black deck, when you're running things like Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth to turn all of your lands into swamps and Cabal Coffers, you can really generate a ton of mana in this kind of deck. It's one of the best things that mono black has going for it, the little Cabal Coffers, Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth interaction, basically. We'll come back to the utility lands in a bit. There's also some other bits of ramp with things like Illumina's, Xera's, and Ashnod's Altar, which care about sacking stuff. The reason why these in the deck, there's a mini sacrifice sub-theme in the deck. That's because with Sidisi being a tutor in the command zone, once it's on the battlefield, it does nothing. By sacrificing it, we can take it back to the command zone, and then we get to cast it again and tutor and use that tutor ability again. That is quite a cool little interaction. So there'll be some sacrifice stuff in other bits of the deck as well. But in any kind of token deck, Ashnod's Altar is going to be solid. That'll make us the mana that we need to actually be able to cast Graaz. And similarly with the Illuminor, we can use this to sack Sidisi once it's in play, once we've already got Graaz into our hand, and help us actually cast Graaz with it. It's actually quite cool. I'm actually going to jump to protection now. So obviously we have Lightning Greaves for protecting Graaz and also giving it haste for 0 mana once it's on the battlefield. That is really good. We like that it lets it attack first because it is also a 7/5. It's going to get through for some damage. The rest of them are the kind of Undying effects. So we have Malakir Rebirth, Undying Evil, and Undying Malice. Why I like these in this deck is obviously they can protect Graaz if it's ever removed. We can use one of these to bring it back into play straight away. But with Sidisi being a tutor, with Sidisi in play, we can sack it to something like Ashnod's Altar, and then cast Malakir Rebirth, Undying Evil, or Undying Malice to have it come back into play straight away, meaning we get to tutor something by exploiting another creature. That is a really cool and quite powerful interaction, which I don't think this deck takes full advantage of, but basically you could add a couple of 2-card combos to this deck very easily and boost the power level. With Sidisi being a tutor in the command zone, it could be quite strong. We'll move on to our card draw now. It's a bit, I'm not going to say over the place, but it's working with all the different things that the deck is trying to do. So there are a lot of artifacts in this deck, so Canopec, Spider, drawing a card whenever another non-token artifact comes into play. When I played this is one of the best cards in the deck. It was honestly giving me so much card draw to kind of keep my hand full. It was really, really good. You have a card like Chronomancer, is what I'm going to say, which again is sacking artifacts to just draw you cards. We have plenty of artifacts in our ramp section. We're making tokens with the Royal Wardens. It will do a bit of work. Deadly Dispute is just a really solid card. Gix Yawgmoth Praetor, I like in any deck that's making tokens and swinging through. In a mono black deck like this that has stuff like Gingerbrute and Signal Pest. I know it doesn't work with Ornithopter because it doesn't actually deal damage until it's a 5/3. But with these token stuff, I really like Gix Yawgmoth Praetor. I'm putting it in way more black decks than I probably should. Mystic Forge is also in. There is actually a high artifact count in the deck. Nowhere near as actually high as if you were building Graaz, just straight Graaz as the commander. But Mystic Forge is a fun card that I do think does enough to kind of make it get in. Phyrexian Arena, I still think is solid in 2023, and the reprint means it's nice and cheap. And then Skullclamp is just really good in any deck with a load of tokens. We're just going to be sacking serfs to this to drawing 2 cards. It's fantastic. And then Triarch Praetorian is another actually evasive creature, but if you unearth it or get it back from your graveyard, you draw 2 cards. That is quite nice. One card I haven't mentioned in the card draw section is Bolas's Citadel. Now we have the Post Malone art for this one, but why not? There could be a world where with Sidisi just tutoring Bolas's Citadel and kind of storming through your deck might be the correct play. Bolas's Citadel is a fantastic card. In one of the games I played, I probably lost it because I got way too greedy with this, but I like being greedy in Commander. It's kind of one of the reasons I play it, so I love Bolas's Citadel in that. But yeah, I think the 8 to 10 range is pretty spot on for where we want to be with our card draw section. So before we move on to win cons, let's have a look at our interaction. So there's a lot of standard fare here. This is actually one way the deck gets way better by it being based in black, because you have things like Feed the Swarm to answer some creatures or enchantments specifically. You have Infernal Grasp. You have things like Mutilate to give everything -1/-1 for each swamp you control. So board wipes and interaction is not tricky when we're running black. A few kind of cooler cards in this. We have Attrition, which is sacrifice creature, destroy target non-black creature for just 1 black. Again, remember what I said about the mini sack theme that lets us sack Sidisi, get it back with one of these. That's a nice little interaction, and in a deck that has so many like token makers, Attrition is just a really cool way of taking advantage of that. The other ones that I think in this deck could be a bit spicy are Cantopec Scarab Swarm, which when it enters the battlefield, exile target player's graveyard. For each artifact or land exiled this way, create a 1/1 colorless insect artifact creature token with flying. And then similarly, we have Svat's Will, which also exiles someone's graveyard. This one, exile all cards from all opponent graveyards, and you make X01 Thrall creature tokens, where X is the greatest power among creatures cards exiled this way. Just generally having ways to muck with your opponent's graveyards is pretty strong. I should know, most of the decks I build are normally graveyard decks. Just having ways to deal with that while also making you a board state like of tokens. So you have your Thralls with Svat's Will, or you have your 1/1 flyers, especially good with Cantopec Scarab Swarm. They're both going to do a lot of work in the deck. I really like them. Then quickly, some recursion. I was running Phyrexian Reclamation, which is just a nice, repeatable way of bringing something back to your hand. Tortured Existence, because this is a pet card of mine. I really like Tortured Existence. And then Victimize. You do definitely need to run some recursion in a deck where your commander isn't in the command zone. Because if it gets removed, if Graaz gets removed, it's just going to go to the graveyard. We can't put it back into the command zone because the commander is Sidisi. So running some recursion is really important. In a deck that didn't have a tutor as the commander, the recursion package would be higher because you really need that redundancy if your commander ever gets removed. Because the commander of this deck is Sidisi and it's a tutor, it means that it's almost toolboxy. You can, if Graaz and Sidisi go to the graveyard because of a board wipe, Sidisi will go back to the command zone. We can then use it to come back into play. It'll extort something, and then we can go and get a Torch Resistance or a Phyrexian Reclamation to bring Graaz back to our hand. That is really, really important in this deck, where the commander isn't actually in your command zone. It doesn't have command attacks, it just goes to the graveyard. It can be gone. And then let's talk about some win conditions. So there's different types of things that the deck is trying to do. So firstly, biotransference, turning everything we control into artifacts, is really, really good. It also makes us a load of tokens whenever we cast a spell. It says artifact spell, but all of our spells are artifacts. It means we're going to be making more tokens every turn. This is a really strong card in the deck. We then have some ways of buffing our team up with something like Drana, Liberator of Malakir. The way this kind of works with the first strike is that when your whole board swings through, this deals first strike damage, and then it'll put a counter on everything you control. That's also attacking. That is really, really good. We have Eldrazi Monument, which just buffs up all our team, gives everything flying indestructible. We like that. Because we're a token deck, we don't really care too much about the sacrifice of creature. If we can't sacrifice this, we're going to have plenty of tokens. We then have Scorpeth Lord, which gives all artifact creatures you control +1/+0 and Menace. Perfect for bucking up your Necrons or your Ornithopter, why not? And then we have Steel Overseer, which we can tap to put a counter on each artifact creature that we control. These are really good because Graaz changes the base power and toughness. Any effects on top of that, like any counters from Steel Overseer, or like the static ability of Scorpeth Lord, will still apply as well. So it just basically means you're just dealing more damage to your opponents, which is what we love. A few other cool cards. I think Marionette Master could be quite strong in this. You can have it come down, you can make a load of servos. It is a token maker at the end of the day. They become 5/3s. Marionette Master also becomes a 5/3 with Graaz out. And then you can start sacrificing your Necron tokens or your other artifacts to something like Ashnod's Altar to then deal people a load of damage. Like if Marionette Master is a 5/3 because of Graaz, it will deal 5 damage to an opponent whenever an artifact goes into the graveyard from your control. That is really strong, and that is a lot of damage. I put Liberator Urzel's Battlethopter in here, just being able to give things flash. Even though it's not all of our deck, it's a good portion of the deck, so I think it can still do some work. Also, it's a 3-mana flyer, which we like in this deck anyway, because Graaz is going to make it a 5/3 flyer, and it also gets bigger with some counters on it, so that is also quite nice. And then with all the black mana that you can make in this deck, with things like your Cryptghast and your Urborgs, I like running something like a Torment of Hailfire in these kind of decks. This could be Exsanguinate, that might be cheaper now, but just having a big X spell, a big way of just nerfing out all your opponents, it's another angle that you can kind of take people out. And because you have Sidisi in the command zone to go tutor it up, it's actually quite attainable in this kind of deck. I really like Torment of Hellfire or something like that. We've gone over some of the utility lands, but I'll go through some of the other ones. Because we're a mono black deck, we can run quite a few. So something like Bojuka Bog, just solid, we might as well run it. Buried Ruin, being able to return an artifact from your graveyard to your hand. Again, this is good for bringing Graaz back if it's ever removed. Mirror Pool should actually be a different card. I think I wrote this deck list up wrong. Mirror Pool should be the Inventor's Fair. That lets you tutor up another artifact from your library. Again, another way of getting Graaz out. We like that. Mortuary Mire, just a way of putting Graaz back on top of our library if it's ever removed. Takenuma does a similar job. Tomb Fortress does a similar job. It's an artifact deck. We might as well run Urza Saga if you have it. War Room is some free card draw, and I love me a Westvale Abbey. In any kind of token deck, just being able to make the 9/7 big flyer off of this is really fun. How big is it? It's a 9/7 flying lifelink indestructible haste. All you need to do is sacrifice 5 creatures, which in this deck is not that hard to do. So this is the version that I played. I had a lot of fun with it. I will put some more budget options down in the maybe board below. So if you were thinking of building this yourself or a deck like this yourself, you can check that out if you're thinking of putting it together a bit more on a budget. So in terms of the games I played with this, how did it actually do? I think I won one of the games I played with it. The second one I know I didn't win because I was playing against a load of life gain decks, and I got really greedy with Bolas' Citadel and end up on two lower life way too quickly and couldn't catch up with anyone else. But the first one I played with this, I think it did pretty well. I did the thing, I made a massive board state of tokens, used a DC, go and got Graaz, smushed through, it was fantastic. The deck worked exactly as I wanted it to. One of the cool things about having a secret commander is that you can leave people guessing, especially if it's the first time you play it, with what the real commander actually is. Unfortunately, it got cold called. Like, as soon as my opponents started seeing me playing like Sengit Autocrat in a Sidisi deck, they were like, ooh, it's Graaz, isn't it? I was like, no, it might not be Graaz. But we all know it was Graaz. It came down, it did its thing, and it was really, really cool. I think I already mentioned this, but like I was really impressed by Cantopec Spider. This came out in both games and just drew me like enough cards to kind of keep me in games and to kind of push me over the edge in the first one, especially when the game I actually won with it. I really liked this card. I thought it was really good. The other one that did a load of work is Illuminor Cesarez. As I said earlier, just being able to use this to sack DC, put it back in the command zone, and use its mana to actually cast Graaz was just really, really good. It meant you could have some really cool turns. And also, the first time you use it to sack DC, it's basically paying for itself. So if you have 2 mana to pay for the command attacks, in theory, you could tutor twice in a turn and go and get 2 things. Like you could get Graaz and then go and get Lightning Greaves, play the Lightning Greaves that turn, so that the next turn when Graaz comes down, it has haste, and then your whole board swinging through. That was a really nice little interaction that the deck can do. So for me, the deck did everything that I wanted it to when I put it together, which is always a nice thing when you build a commander deck. It let me play Graaz, do the big dumb thing with Graaz, while also playing some cool new Necron cards, which are a ton of fun. I really like those cards. So many things from the 40k sets, and I want to be playing with them more as the year goes on. On the Too Sweet MTG scale of how powerful this is, I would put this as a solid 7, maybe? Maybe that's a little high. I think if you were running some more tutors in here and some more redundant effects, then this could be quite a powerful deck. This deck isn't really competing with like combo decks in its current build, but in kind of like good, fair Magic, I think this deck will put up a good fight. Just having Sidisi being able to go get you answers if you need it to is really nice. That is quite a strong little thing that you can do with it. In terms of improvements, I personally wouldn't change anything. I like the deck like this. This is what I was trying to do with the deck. You could definitely make it better by almost kind of taking out some of the artifact stuff and just going ham with the token makers. Think of kind of like a Nyara kind of aristocratic deck that's just putting a load of tokens into play, and then basically you're just Sidisiing for Graaz as kind of like a mono black kind of overrun, like Crater Hoof, that kind of thing. That could be super strong. Also, I know there's really dumb ways of building Sidisi as this kind of tutor effect. I think there's like ad nauseum builds that you can do with it, where you're using it to just go find your combo piece. That is, again, something you could do. You could put in some 2-card combos into this and lean into it that way, if that's something you wanted to do. For me, the goal was to kill people with Graaz, and I did that, and I thought it was great. So thank you all very much for watching. Do let me know down in the comments what you think of the deck. What changes would you make? How would you improve it? Let me know. I would be interested in hearing that. Also, what do you think of the idea of running Graaz as a secret commander? Do you think just having Graaz in the command zone would be more consistent, would be better? Was adding the black cards kind of like gilding the lily, kind of going a bit too much with it? Was I trying to be too clever? Let me know what you think. I would be interested in knowing. But anyway, until next time, please like, share, and subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.